Welcome to our panel series, Conversations on Change. And today we'll be chatting candidly with Maya and Havovi about turning ambition into achievement through real-world case studies and lessons learned. So now let's find out a little bit more about our guest speakers. Dr. Havovi Joshi is the director at the Center for Case Learning Excellence at Singapore Management University, SMU. So let's welcome Havovi. Hi, Havovi. It's so good to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Adeline. Pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now our next expert, Maya Mazid, is a seasoned HR leader with over 17 years of experience across technology, professional services, engineering, and retail sectors. It's really great to have you here with us too, Maya. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you so much, Adeline. Very looking forward to it, especially with Havovi. So thanks.
Strategy often looks flawless in meeting rooms and slide decks, but the real test lies in execution and translating vision into concrete actions, measurable outcomes, and sustainable impact. So how do we move from vision to action, from intent to impact? And that's at the heart of today's conversation. We'll explore how organizations can move beyond planning, tackle execution challenges, and also build the momentum needed to turn strategy into lasting value. But let's start by setting the scene. When you think about successful execution, Havovi and Maya, what are a few non-negotiable things that leaders must get right from the start? Who would like to go first? Perhaps Dr. Havovi, you would like to take this first question first.
Sure. Thank you, Adeline. And Maya, please chime in with your practical experience here. So I think I will be shifting a little bit back and forth in my answers from based on my experience because, as you mentioned, Adeline, I have about 15 years in consulting and banking and then another 15 years in academia. So some of my answers will be based on what research is showing, as well as what we are really seeing in the practitioner world. So you're absolutely spot on about the fact that strategy execution is where the trouble seems to be lying. And though, of course, I do look at it rather skeptically, there is some research which says that as much as 70% of strategy fails when you try and implement it. So if you ask me today, what are the real non-negotiables? I would say, first of all, is purely the clarity of purpose as to why is there even a change happening. It's not just about the vision, the goals, but it's about, is it sufficiently high? Is it aspirational? There was some McKinsey research which was done which said that typically the vision is so watered down that the targets should have been 2.5 times higher. Now, down the line, does that get accepted? This is where we come to the crunch of the question. And then that will lead us to the next non-negotiable point, which is that as a leadership team, you're committed to your strategy. You're championing it. You're modeling your behavior. You're doing everything correct. You're ticking the boxes. But it comes down to the communication. The communication down the line. Is it really reaching every rung of the organizational hierarchy? We used to talk about how something has to be repeated 21 times for it to become a habit. Something similar here. Is the same message going across? Is it consistent? Is it actually championing your cause? Are your stakeholders truly invested in what you're saying? Are they engaged? Are they sympathetic to what you are talking about? And with that comes something which I am quite passionate about, which is the whole art of storytelling. Not just communication, but weaving that narrative with stories as to why is it important, because that is then what will hit the emotional perspective. There are a few other points, about having the change agents, about getting the background processes in place, aligning your system, setting the roadmap. But I think I'm going to turn it over to Maya because this is really what, Maya deals with. So I'm sure she's got a lot to add here. So over to you, Maya.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you, Havovi. And it's so true. I basically had the same points that you said, that it really, you can have the biggest vision, right, but it's about the strategy. How are we going to do this? And clarity. Why are we doing it? Big believer of over communicate than under. Like what you said, repeating it so people are on board. The other thing I would say, and you touched on it before, is the leadership and the alignment. So it's like when you discipline a child, mom and dad must be on the same page. We can have fights in the background, but when we respond to the child, we must be on the same page. So similarly, as leaders or as a leadership team or an ELT, you're going to the people with the same alignment and the same communication and the same message to everybody. The other one is also, empowering not just the leaders, but the people as well with that trust. You've got to take them on that journey and remove, any bottlenecks or any, issues that they have, so that they understand the why as well. And we can touch upon that in a few other questions as well. But I think, those are the three main things is, clarity, vision, alignment, and then that empowerment and trust. And it's whatever strategy you have, it's the people that will be doing the executions, not your PowerPoint slides, not your whiteboard that you've been drawing on for, 3-4 months. It's the people that will be executing. So it's very important to take them on that journey, keep them posted, and understand where they fit in as well, and communicating that.
Thanks for that answer, Maya. And Havovi and Maya, you both have answers that really resonate with each other as well. I can see the overlapping threads, about communication and about your message. I really like what you said, especially Havovi, about the message not being watered down and staying focused and clear. But Maya, you just led me into my next question, actually talking about alignment. How do you manage alignment when it comes to strategy at the top and execution from the bottom? So how do you manage that clear line of communication to make sure that it's not just a strategy that happens in the meeting room, but when we are executing it on the ground? Maybe Havovi can go again, and then we'll circle back to Maya again.
Sure, happy to do that. I think a lot of it about the alignment we have spoken about, but I think there are 3 additional points that I would like to add here. The first is getting it down to the level of what does it actually mean for you. So taking what is given in, the classic boardroom PowerPoint slides and working it down to how would your behavior need to change, or what would have to be done differently, or what does success mean with this change? Is there any change, for instance, in the alignment of, KPIs and incentives? So the very nuts and bolts of the whole strategy. So for instance, we've had a change right now at our center where our reporting lines have changed. We've moved from what used to be called the research vertical into the education vertical. In my view, it was handled extremely well because not only was the communication consistent, but it was also as to why are we doing this? What will this mean on a daily basis? What work do you retain and what work would have to, be passed on? Things like that. The second key point, which I think is very, very important in getting this alignment is to engage the next few levels. And it's not just about the communication side or the stakeholder engagement, but it's also about sense making, which then percolates down the line. The same thing. Why is this happening? Why are our lives, which were going quite on an even keel, suddenly being tossed? Is there a real reason for it? Is it just being done for the sake of it? Very valid questions which people have. And that takes me to the third and final point, which is making sure you have very strong feedback loops. I think that's something which is very important when you're trying to align the top level strategy with execution, where formally, informally, through pulse checks, you get to know what is working, what is not, where are the apprehensions, where are those roadblocks, which some of them, which as we've all experienced, may on the face of it seem very minor and then just blows up. So those, I think, mechanisms are also very important. Maya, would you have anything to add to those?
No, I think what you said is really on point. And it is, I love that you said you should go down a few levels, that it's not just, oh yes, we have the executive leadership team, they're on board, we've got their support, let's just go and do. It is the people, the few down the levels that are going to be your change makers, your change champions, whatever you want to call them. They're going to be your voice to the people that are going to be actually doing the execution. So it's also important to go down to that level. So I love that you touched on that as well.
Thanks for that, Havovi and Maya. And Maya, I think you're really reading my mind because again, you're leading me a segue into my next question, actually, talking about change, because change at all we are all about the change and transformation. So because we care about transformation, on that note, from your experience, I'd be really interested to find out, because of all your experience in this area, what is the biggest barrier organizations might face when moving from strategy into reality, as we were saying?
So I think it's actually a misalignment of the leadership and what their intent is, what they want to achieve, and then the employees' reality. Like again, what Havovi just said, oh well, everything was going okay. Why are you making this change? And I think in my experience in this current organization, we were rolling out a shared services, and so on paper it was great. Business case was there. We had so much data to back everything up. We were setting up a shared services in Asia, and the issue that we realized was a lot of the leaders didn't really understand or had different interpretations of what a shared services would actually mean to them and their business on a day-to-day basis, how it would impact their operations. And so that inconsistency was a bit confusing for teams. And so we went kind of back to the drawing board and said, no, we have to over communicate to these leaders. We have to go back and understand or communicate the scope, the governance, and then how it would impact them. And then that adoption and acceptance of this team or this new shared services model was accelerated and accepted, more importantly, by the leaders, to understand how that's really going to benefit their business. So with strategy, I don't think it fails because of a lack of intent or poor design. We're designing, we had the business case, we had the data to back it up. It fails because of gaps in communication and consistency. Leaders have to be they have to really steward the execution, not just be part of the launch, So I think that's a great example. Yes, you can go back to the drawing board. You can go back and say, okay, my stakeholder is not engaged yet. Let's go back and do it and make it a lot more clear on how this is going to impact them and their business.
That sounds great. And actually, talking about clarity, it's becoming so clear, from both your answers for both these questions to set up the scene, that there are some things that really are clearly non-negotiable, as we said. Talking about weaving the narrative in repeatedly and making sure that we're all on the same page and understand why we're on the same page. So again, there's that point about the clarity and the narrative and the communication. And Maya, you were talking about us being in Asia, and that's true. We are in Asia, and Asia is a region of, not just rapid growth, but also complexity and diverse markets and regulations and cultures. So, I'm interested to know how does this affect the way strategies are executed here in Asia as compared to in the West? Perhaps now Havovi would like to take this question.
Sure. I actually love this question because I teach this master's course called Doing Business in Asia. And one of the questions that keeps coming up is how do Asian-based companies fare when they try and go overseas? Because we hear so much about the Western MNCs coming here, but what happens when firms from this part of the world want to go? And in fact, research shows that they do very well. They struggle maybe internally with their resources. But one of the reasons they do well is because they are so used to working in an environment of almost permanent chaos and change, So if you leave a few, what I call the havens like Singapore, Japan, the rest of this region, there's this word called permacrisis, which became the Oxford, word of the year. And I think permacrisis is what, in a sense, defines Asian countries. So, what does that mean when you navigate that kind of environment, and what are the insights from Asia stories? One is that most of them have accepted that volatility and uncertainty is pretty much a given. So their systems are geared up for that. They're used to thinking and moving faster. Of course, I'm not getting now into the large, multinationals. They've got roughly the same kind of bureaucracy or systems everywhere. But the culture on the whole is one which in Asia you'll find embraces change. I think if we look at more insights from how they deal with it, they are very attuned to market trends and they're very nimble. They're also used to working with the government, which is a very, very big factor. And on the whole, they think local. So they've aligned their products and their services with the customer's expectations. They appreciate local insights. And so, on the whole, when they try and execute change, they are used to it. They know how to go about it. And they are quite successful at it. Maya, would you have something there which
I think you've really hit the nail on the head. I think even I look after APAC, and that includes ANZ and India as well, and Southeast Asia. And there's so many nuances, even from a HR perspective, right? If I only just look at legislation, for example, we're trying to create these policies that's either coming from head office, which is Europe, that's not always resonating, in Asia market, or there's certain programs or initiatives that we're wanting to or being told to roll out, and we can't do that. Or if we want to have, APAC-wide policies, we have to always change them to suit local markets. And so I think that's really important I can only speak from a HR perspective, but for me, when I have my local leaders or my local HR people in my team, I need their input. Hey, we want to roll this out. How is it going to be in the Philippines market? Well, Philippines, actually, this is how, it would be received. So we still want to get to the same goal. We want to still have the same impact, but we may have to take a few different avenues to get there. And I think even just employee engagement in general, in Australia, we run some things which are a bit different to what we'd run in Singapore or Malaysia. I'm not going to start this topic because it will take us off on a tangent, but the return to work or return to office topic is very, very big. And that's a great example of how different it is in every single side of the world, really. We have employees in Asia. If the country manager says return to work, they pretty much return to work. And then in Australian market, it's a little bit more different, or in Europe, it's a little bit more different. So there's different, cultural nuances that come into play as well.
Thank you, Maya. Thanks, Havovi, for the answer before as well. And it was so insightful, Havovi, what you shared. And actually, Maya, you were talking about policies and in different countries in the region. I think what we're really talking about now is culture, right? And talking about culture, I think it can be described as the engine of execution. So, how do you create a culture that actually that that delivery and execution? We already started talking about it a little bit.
Well, we all know that saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and we're talking about those two exact things. And I could talk about strategy to the rest of the night, but I'm not going to do that. Look, here it really does go back to strategy, culture, because I think even in an organization, you have mini cultures as well within the team. So, there's one culture or strategy that, you want to run throughout your whole business, but then even within teams or within agile teams, you'll have a certain culture as well. And then you have this, overarching culture, which leads back to your values, your propositions, what you're trying to achieve and your goals, strategic goals as an organization. So I think the culture is so important in terms of, especially when you're rolling out a new strategy or a change management or transformation, because it's the invisible hand that either accelerates or derails your execution. And I think I touched upon this before in the beginning, where I said, it's the people that are doing the execution, and you can't deliver your results without them. And for that, you need a culture that is accountable, collaborative, continuous learning. Even, at Crayon, we're going through major transformation, and we're focusing on, inclusion, psychological safety, we're creating forums with, recognizing people who speak up. We're trying to build ownership. So if you give that culture where people feel that it's shared responsibility and it's not just, they told me from top down and that's why I have to execute it. So I think for me, it's so pivotal in this sort of change and implementation of anything new. And I think, if you can have that culture that has that execution of, where people are accountable and are feeling safe as well, and then of course it goes back to the leader. And again, I'm going to say this again, they need to be the steward. So not just designing, but actually really leading, the teams to this new change.
Thanks for that. And actually, I wanted to explore this a little bit further in a slightly different direction, because you were saying something that was very interesting before. You said that there is a culture in a lot of parts of Asia where people are just doing what they're told. So rather than just, doing what they're told, how do you actually inspire and engage employees so that they're believing in what they're doing rather than just following directives? Is there any advice that you can share in how you can inspire and engage employees better?
So my company Crayon is actually, we've just been acquired by a larger organization. So I'm literally in the midst of going through change management and change and transformation. So I can tell you firsthand what's going on. But I think from a HR perspective, a lot of the times things are just seen as, that's just a HR thing that we need to do, or we've just been told to do that. And a lot of times you'll hear us say to the leaders, hey, we need you on this with us. We need you to deliver this message. We need you to say how important it is. And so what I'm loving right now is, we have identified, and again, I think Havovi touched on this at the beginning, change champions, and that's from all parts of the business, from both organizations. And that's been communicated really effectively. And that's what I love, that it's not just a HR or a, executive thing. It's people that I work with on a daily basis who are getting trained to be these change, makers, these change champions who I can go to, feel comfortable, give my feedback, and I know that that person is taking my concerns up the ladder. And I think that really impacts people because they see, it's not top down, it's a shared ownership, and you create that engagement to say, okay, I see why that's happening, and I see how I fit in, and I feel comfortable to raise any issues that I have through these change champions. However, would you add anything like that to the change champions thing we're looking at?
No, I love what you've said, Maya. It really resonates. And I think the one word which I would really put in when we talk about culture is trust. It comes down, I think, to that, and that's why I feel organizations, when things are calm and settled, those short little nuggets of time before again you get whacked by another change, you really need to invest in your employees, their emotional journeys, their well-being. That's your time to kind of gain your brownie points, which you can then pull out when you know there's going to be a certain level of chaos. But it's interesting because when one was, say, I was with a bank for about 10 years, there, the culture was such that there was change, for sure. We were also acquired, but the change was a very process-driven change when I look back. It's 20 years, but it was that this will happen and this will happen, and then your books would be transferred here. And today in a university, I see that you cannot do change at all in that manner, because now whatever you're doing, whether as faculty or staff, you're impacting thousands of students in some way. So the culture is very different. And with that, I think what is important to note is that it's so contextual, bringing organizational change. So yeah, that's it from my side.
I totally agree about that, Havovi. It is very contextual, and it's very case by case for sure. And Maya, I really like what you said about the shared ownership. I think it's so important when the communication is not only the line of communication not only open, but it is clear that it is a two-way, it's a dialogue. So I think that's really important. And we were talking about culture now. I'd like to circle back a little bit to talk about Asia markets. So talking about culture in Asia markets, many Asian companies are family-led or family founder driven. So what unique challenges or advantages would that bring when translating strategy into action? I think, Havovi, this is your playing field.
Yes, and I can really talk about this for quite a long time, so I shall keep it brief. You're so right. So much of the business here, especially in Asia, is family business. In fact, it holds true for most of the world, but Asia particularly so. And I think when people generally think of family businesses, sometimes you think of those classic mom and pop kind of shops, not realizing that the biggest names from this part of the world are in fact all still family businesses. So coming to your question, Adeline, what are the real advantages when you're a family business and you're trying to implement change? Because there are a few of that. One is that management layers tend to be fewer. So decision making, with the caveat that it is aligned with the family priorities and the family values and what the head of the family wants, tends to be much quicker. There's less bureaucracy, greater agility. Um, the other part, which is also very interesting, is that typically employees have research has shown they tend to stick around longer in family businesses. There's a lot more loyalty. And especially it's changing now with it gets more professionalized, but in the earlier, more traditional setup, getting the stakeholder staff alignment was easier because many of them are generally long-term employees, and so they're aligned with their owner's vision and thinking. And the third point, which is really important, is that family businesses tend to be much more committed to their vision. We have a term which we call vacillating commitment. You don't see that too much in the family businesses because there are not those frequent leadership changes. And so when they go in for something, they tend to stick there. They push for drive-in execution. They own it. So that is the advantages. What are the challenges? The challenges is that the classic kind of pull and push between tradition, we've always done it this way, versus trying to bring about change. So, legacy versus that innovation kind of friction. The second one is that often, especially at the really leadership levels, professional talent could be limited. It still could be very much with the family. And that means that the point which I was talking about, the feedback loops, they can be weakened. And finally, of course, family businesses still do struggle sometimes with resources constraint. And here I'm not talking so much about capital plus, staffing, but even ideas which would bring in change. Because again, it goes back to we've done it this way. So yeah, I think that in a nutshell is what I would say are some of the very unique challenges and advantages that family businesses face when they're translating strategy or change strategy into action.
Definitely. And there's that word ownership again when it comes to legacy and not having the usual bureaucracy in place. Maya, do you have anything to add about that from your experience?
I think some of those challenges are not limited to family owned. I think in some of the larger organizations, we've got similar issues. Sometimes there are organizations that have had, long-term leadership, and that brings upon its own challenges as well, from, an execution or strategy or even a HR perspective as well. So I think challenges pretty similar all around as well. But I mean, I could listen to Havovi talk about that all the time. So
So actually, we were talking about founders and leaders. So I'm really curious, are there any really essential, because we talked about non-negotiables at the beginning, at the very beginning. So are there any essential skills or mindsets for leaders to have if they want to be not just coming up with great strategies, but also successful strategy executors? Maybe Maya, you would like to take this question.
yeah, I mean, look, the communication, the execution, it all leads back to the leader, right? And I think from a HR perspective, we are always focused on the leader. There was recently some survey came out, which again still talked about how people leave managers and not organizations, because the leader or the manager is the person that has the most impact on your day-to-day, right? And so if you, and again, like touching upon what Havovi said, where she, said you have to go down to a few different layers of the leadership, you need them to say the same message, you need them to be bought into it. And again, repeating what Havovi said is about trust, that you need to lead with trust. And, there's this not new, but relatively newer type leadership, where it's leading with vulnerability. It's okay. And especially during times of change, which I will admit I am leading through a little bit of vulnerability at the moment because I'm going through my own change as well, right? It's impacting my team at the moment. And just last week we had a session. I actually said, AMA, ask me anything. Let's get everything out on the table. What are you feeling anxious about? What are the things that we can control and what are the things that we can't control, right? And because it's still business as usual, we're being asked for a lot more information. There's a lot of unknown. We're still going through. We're really in the heart of it at the moment. So I think if the employees feel that psychological safety, that I can bring up issues, I won't be disheartened if I raise something, and the leaders feel like they can empower their teams as well and take them through the journey. I think that's really, really important. Havovi, anything to add?
No, I completely agree with you, Maya. And I just feel that, in a sense, at a time of change is when you're looking the most at your leader. And, that person has to epitomize what a role model needs to be. Because the word you used is vulnerability, which is so true. You are at a low because especially I think in today's world where information flows, knowledge transfer is so rapid. You're not sitting in a cocoon where um, you can be a little oblivious, and that whole ignorance is bliss no longer works because you're aware that this could be your job on the line, and due to no fault of yours, due to nothing that you did wrong, or even wrong is too far, but it's not that you may have been an outstanding performer, and yet this change is impacting you personally, and it hurts. So that's where your leader steps in and gives clarity, provides that safe space for you to articulate just thoughts, which may not even be very clear in your mind, and also gives, the point we first spoke about, that vision, not just in that very open terms, but a crystal clear roadmap that this is what we have envisaged. As of these dates, these milestones, this should happen. At this point, we should hopefully get back to business as usual, align the system so that it makes that change possible. So all of these things are what you are looking for at this time from a leader.
I think that is so true. I think that is really great what both of you have said. And, we talk about strength in leadership, we talk about strong leaders, but the thing is, the word vulnerability is used. It's really more about openness, and it's not a weakness at all. In fact, it's the opposite. And when you are being vulnerable as a leader, I think it also enables your team to be vulnerable along with you. And that's where the open communication really, really takes place. And with that, I think I wanted to end our session formally with a future focused tone. So looking ahead, since we're talking about leaders, if you could leave leaders with one piece of advice about taking business strategy into reality, what would it be? So perhaps Havovi, this time you can go first.
I think my one strategy, and I've really kind of thought about this, it would be to build your communication skills. I genuinely feel it comes down to that. The written one is getting a little easier with AI support. They do help a lot more in making it conversational and what have you, but learn to communicate very authentically, transparently, invite questions. That would really be my one big takeaway for this.
That's so true, and it really resonates with the entire tone of the conversation, actually. Thanks for that, Havovi. And what I like about it is also that it's very easy to remember, communicate authentically, and it leads back to what we were talking about before as well, about trust. Thanks for that. Maya, how about you?
I mean, look, I've been dealing with people for a long time, so I would say people are your strategy. You can have all the strategies in the world, but again, the execution will be your people. So I think it's so important to see it like that, even from your employees' perspective, and I think again, have always touched on it at the beginning, like, why is this happening to me? Why is there change? Why is it this? So to see it from their lens as well, to see, to try to address some of the issues that they may be facing, I think. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Maya. It's so true what both of you are saying, actually, and I really appreciated all these insights. And with that, I think let's take some time now for questions and comments from the audience. The floor is now open. Please raise your hand via emoticon and we'll call on you. Or if you prefer, you may also type your questions in the chat box. We have just put down both Maya's and Havovi's answers to that last future-focused question.
And I see there is a question here. I think, Karnish, this must have come from you, which is about AI and tech in hand communication via apps is increasing. Yes.
That's right. So this question is from actually our founder of Change at All, Maya and Havovi. He would like to hear from both of you. With so much of AI and tech in hand, I find communication via apps and text, etc., is increasing, but verbal communication, where people connect the most, is going down. Are you seeing the same? Any views on that? Maybe Havovi, would you like to go first, since you started reading it?
No, I could not agree more. And this is, in fact, become one of the biggest problems we're having at the university today. Our students actually are not comfortable even speaking up in the classroom, which you would think that, should be easy, but they prefer corresponding via email rather than, just coming up. And of course, I don't want to make, these are now becoming very, very, I'm generalizing, so please do take it with a pinch of salt, but it is true that they are far more comfortable, even group work, with I'll do this part, you do that part, we'll then exchange it via email, rather than let's just sit around a table and discuss and put it down. So spot on observation, and I would really, really agree with it. Maya, what about you?
I mean, obviously, I work in tech industry and have for the last 5 years. So even the changing technology, keeps us quite agile. And again, I'm going to touch on that favorite topic of mine, working from home. So that technology has allowed people to work from home and work remotely. I'm still a big believer of coming to the office and having face-to-face interactions. I still come to the office at least three times a week. And I think that's where you get the most communication. I was struggling with one leader. I met up with him for coffee downstairs. We resolved the issue within like 2 minutes of talking. And I think, again, what you go back to is communication. So I think the ease of the typing or the texting or the Teams chat can sometimes also be misinterpreted. And people might think that, you're making some sort of particular tone when you're not. So I think that's when you have these calls or communication face to face or even on the phone, the message is transferred much easier with tone, with voice, with hand gestures, with eye contact, all those things. I don't think the emojis can cover all of our types of looking and, smiling and all those things. So I think it's some of it. Yes, the technology, and what you said, technology is great. It's just a tool. It shouldn't take over our whole lives, and especially our work lives. So I think that important that, verbal communication, face-to-face communication is really, really important, especially when you're delivering some sort of news during change or things like that. It's really, really important.
Yeah. And I think it also goes back, Adeline, to what we had spoken about, the culture.
Yes.
When culture is so important that non-verbal gestures, eye contact that Maya spoke, talking about, that becomes even more critical because you're navigating your way through sometimes a very alien culture. And on the whole, people are more receptive and kinder to verbal communication mishaps there rather than the written one. That kind of gets cast in stone.
And you know, we were talking, and now it's such a hot topic that we're talking about in terms of how artificial intelligence is taking over, and that worry about replacing people, replacing jobs. But actually, that is the one irreplaceable thing, isn't it? Human interaction, human types of communication, whether verbal or non-verbal, you know. So whether translated through facial expressions or gestures or through your tone. So I think that is so true. Thanks for that question, KP. And thanks for those answers, Havovi and Maya. And now we have about a little bit more than 10 minutes left. It's a quieter, more passive audience today than usual. But now is your chance to ask Havovi and Maya any questions that you might have, or even make any comments that you would like to make based on the conversation that just happened. Please feel free to do so. Or if you prefer to type in the chat box, as we did mention, please also feel free to do so. I'll just wait for maybe 1 or 2 more minutes for people to finish typing.
I think this is such a fascinating question on communication, and you can actually really see in a way, the generation divide also sometimes. I love interacting with our students. Their whole acceptance of change and it's fascinating. One is learning so much from them all the time. They use these AI tech in hand almost as if they're breathing it.
Yeah.
So, and then their communication is very different. Not good, bad, any other of those comments, but just different from what it used to be even, say, 20 years back.
My 10-year-old wanted to buy quite an expensive makeup. No. And she used ChatGPT to write a justification as to why she should get this makeup.
Amazing.
It's parenting in the era of AI, so I don't know how to. I mean, I still don't know, but
I feel like that is taking strategy into reality as well, because she had a plan in mind, she had a strategy in mind, and she's using technology to try and implement it. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's it.
So I think I have a couple more questions then, if our audience participants do not want to make use of this time. I'd love to pick both your brains a little bit more. I'm really interested to know if you can share an example where perhaps a strategy looked solid in design at one time but had to be adapted during execution. Would you have any story to share about that? Did anything like this happen from a case study that you've come across, or maybe from your own experience?
I mean, we have had not exactly, there was a vision, for example, at the previous university where I was associated with, where we decided to start a new publication which would bring about the ASEAN community of universities come together, and each one would contribute an article, and then it would be distributed amongst their own network. And it was such a solid vision. It looked so good. We were expecting close to, 500,000 viewership, because we had got it all worked out, multiplied as to how many would there be who would contribute and read from these 10 ASEAN countries. Ran with it for 9 months and then closed it. It just did not take off. Month after month, for 9 months, we tried, and it just didn't work. Number of reasons. the senior leadership team was very interested. Down the line, the contributors did not really see how it was aligned with their own incentives or what their own KPIs were. So the contributions after the first one became weaker, and thereafter it just went into a vicious spiral and we closed it down. So I do think there is a lot of those where the execution just sometimes you even can't think it through when you are actually coming out with the vision. So
Thanks for
Maya,
sharing
would
that
you have?
example.
Yeah.
It does sound like a really great concept. So I can understand the effort to make it work. Anything to add to that, Maya? Do you have that in your experience?
I think, yeah, in organizations where they think they're heading towards, one strategy or one, they want to achieve something, and then we put, especially when we're implementing systems, I think I think implementing systems when you think you're wanting a certain type of, outcome, and then throughout the way the strategy changes and you're like, oh, no, that's not what I wanted already. And then we've invested.
Yeah.
So I've had that where I was in a very large Australian organization, and we implemented this really large ERP system. There was project teams working on it. It was like a 40,000 plus company, very large. And then we got bought out by a larger company who said, no, that's not our ERP. We're going to be rolling out, our one. So
Yeah.
it was like Havovi said, months and months of planning, execution, testing, all these things. And then, because the leadership changed and the strategy changed, or, the outcome changed, then, we had to implement something again. So I think that is, quite hard when those things happen where you do have to shift or you have to change, or it doesn't always
Absolutely.
work. It doesn't always work. And
Absolutely.
that's the reality of it. So yeah, I think you've got 2 questions in the chat.
Yes,
So
I
don't know.
do.
Yeah.
I'm really happy about that. Unfortunately, we have only a little bit over 5 minutes in the conversation left. So it may be time only for one more question. We'll see. But with change comes resistance. Priyanka asks, how do you distinguish between destructive resistance and constructive resistance that leaders should actually listen to? I think this is a really, really great question. Maybe Maya, you'd like to go first this time.
Call me a little bit naive, but I actually think you need a little bit of destructive resistance, because I think it kind of it's quite telling of your team. And I think sometimes, when that person is, bringing up issues, I think the other people who have kind of jumped on board, have, accepted this change, is on board, really wanting this change, they are the ones that actually make this person realize, hey, this is going to actually be good for us. So I think it's just as important to have your advocates and your change champions who are really relaying that message. And I think, if you do identify people that are being destructive, actually sit down with them and understand and create that open communication and understand, how can we help and what the issue is.
Thanks for that. And we're again seeing that resonance. It's all about that through line, that narrative, that open line of communication. Havovi, anything to add to this question?
I think I would just totally agree with Maya and say that to me the distinguishing factor is really the intent. Why is the person? Is it coming from a place of wanting to actually fix the problem, to actually negotiate and to come up with a better solution? Or is it really more about, that passive aggressive behavior,
Right.
just ignoring, deadlines, missing submissions? That's, where it would come to. And I think while all of us would prefer the constructive side, sometimes this destructive one also has a really good message because it forces you to rethink the entire strategy.
Absolutely. Totally agree about that. Because it's also about, as you said, intention. Why and where is this supposedly destructive resistance coming from to begin with? And I think we do have time for that last question, which is directed to Maya, but I think Havovi, we would also welcome your input on this. Do you see a shift on strategy execution style or better conversion lately with the help of AI, or do you not see much of that yet and it's still evolving?
I think that's a good question. There's a
It's from
very,
KP.
very good article if you want to read it. It's actually from Microsoft. It's called The Frontier Firm. And it talks about all these, organizations that are now becoming the frontier firm that are working with your agents, AI agents, managing AI agents, and even Copilot and those things. And I think, yeah, oh, sorry, I thought you said. And I think it really depends on what team, like, so we have a large data and AI team, right? So they are the ones that are going to customers and helping to actually build the codes, all those things for the customers and what they want. But the feedback we got from the people was that the customer doesn't actually know what they want. They know they need to have some sort of AI or Copilot or something, but they don't actually know what they want. So we're kind of going back and forth to see, okay, yes, we can deliver this for you, but this is how, it will implement. So I think there's still a long way to go. And I think, if you think of it as, as a tool to help rather than, a
Absolutely.
barrier, I think that's good. Yeah. So, and again, I think it depends on each leader. Some leaders have a very good grasp of it. And then some leaders, don't want to deal with it at all. And I think even in the education sector, this topic would come up too, have we?
Totally.
Yeah,
Will
you're
be anything
absolutely
to add?
right. No, you're absolutely right. I think where we are finding AI helping us in strategy execution is a lot in the monitoring of progress.
Right.
It helps us a lot with, vast amounts of data, collating it, seeing things, how is it responding, and making tweaks a little quicker.
Yes.
Mm, mm.
Absolutely. Thank you both for your answers. And with that, I think that's the end of our time. It was really great seeing everyone as usual. And this time we had quite a few new faces join us, actually. So thank you for joining us for the first time. We hope that you enjoyed the session and you'll be back. So for those who would like to revisit this conversation, please do visit our Change It All pages on Facebook and LinkedIn. You'll find the links in the chat box. We will have posts of the recording. Thank you again for joining us, and please give another round of applause to our guests, experts, Maya and Havovi. Thank you so much for joining us and gracing us with your insights.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.
And to everyone, please like and follow us to get more updates. We do have those links in the chat box that you can click on and find our pages. And in the meantime, do have a lovely Thursday evening and a great start to the weekend ahead.
Thank you.